Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of the Angelo Robles podcast on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeart, and other platforms. And I'm the founder and CEO at FamilyOffice Association. It's really been a great pleasure for me over the last near 6 months of COVID to do near daily interviews, and some of them we produce in our YouTube channel and selectively some others in our podcasting platform. But it's a tremendous opportunity. I get to learn so much having so many great guests. We have a great guest on today. Usually you could tell when their name kind of makes it into the title. Well, I hope we have a great guest all the time. But today's guest, it's titled Jason Ma on Global Geopolitical Turbulence, Implications, and Strategic Business Roadmaps. Jason addresses U.S. and international, Asia Pacific, China business, revenue growth, world affairs, corporate and business development, venture and strategic investment, private equity, M&A, digital transformation, HR, human capital, succession planning, and the future of work and education. Or multi-generational, cross-cultural, diverse, and inclusive leadership 3.0. Our special guest today is, of course, Jason Ma, CEO and Chief Mentor. We're really excited, and acclaimed author, I might add as well. Jason, it's great to have you back.
Well, thank you so much for inviting, Angelo. It was a blast last time, and I hope to really rock on with you this time.
Yeah, so we had Jason on a couple of months ago, as I noted before we started to record. This will effectively be completely different. Now that we're in September here in the US, we're about 2 months away from the election. There's just so much going on from a geopolitical perspective. And Jason has such a breadth of information that it's wonderful to have a dialogue with him to engage our live audience today, and hopefully something that we could come away and learn from. A little bit of a heads up, Jason is quite the trooper. Someone had very significant kind of shoulder reconstructive surgery in the last week, but I'm glad he got through it. His baseball pitching career is over. If that was ever on the table, Jason, it's gone.
Gone.
You'll be fine. In the future, stop doing your 1,000 push-ups a day.
I'm pretty amazed at the troop was like 15 people, right? The surgery room, the nurses, the staff, very professional, out of the surgery room in 2 hours. And but as I'm talking to you, the surgery was about 6 days ago, and I'm a little bit drowsy. My voice is not fully back. But I'm in good spirits, and I hope to be able to inspire and enlighten your audience.
Let's do it. So let's not even beat around a bush. Let's get to some of the core topics early. So as I noted, we're approximately about 60 days away from the presidential election here in the U.S. In my lifetime, and I'm not a spring chicken, and I have followed politics really effectively since I was a kid in the 70s, I've never seen it so bifurcated between the two major political parties here in the US, the Democrats and the Republicans. And, we've spoken before. I think like many people, there are some things I probably skew more towards on the Republican side of things: government involvement, taxes, less regulation, less government onerous involvement. And there are other things I probably skew more on the Democratic side of things, on social causes, on, from my perspective, I think marijuana should be completely legal, and a variety of other subjects. So sometimes I don't know what camp that I fit into, but I try to have an open mind, and I have friends on both sides, even when they're a little bit on the extreme of both sides. But why has it become so contentious with Democrats and Republicans?
Man, that's a very deep question. I think, in fact, I think, Angelo, you and I are similar in many ways in terms of our philosophies, right? But if I feel that something's not right, I won't hesitate to challenge you. And I will not hesitate to voice my concerns or opinions or actionable insights, right? Because that's what friends do. And like you, I have friends on both sides, right? Very good friends, flaming liberal all the way to far right. I love them just as much, right? So as for myself, I'm very open-minded. I probably operate from a center and oscillate both ways depending on the situation, and kind of moderate over time. I think with age, as a tail end baby boomer, wisdom kind of increases with a good experience. I think, you know, it's not like something totally new, right? And when you step back and look at America, I look at it sort of like ancient Rome. In fact, there are quite a bit of similarities today versus ancient Rome a while back, right? About 2,000 years ago, and a little bit after that, is that I see America in the slow growth phase of the product life cycle, if you will, right? I'm from Silicon Valley, right? So innovation, design, and we're very kind of, you know, aggressive in some ways, and in trying to be innovative and entrepreneurial. And I walk out the streets, I'm surrounded by the best of the best all the time, right? So I pick up a lot of ideas. And when you look at a product life cycle, you know, it is sort of development before profit kicks in, right? And then introduction. And then you got fast growth phase, and then you got growth phase and a slow growth phase. That's where America is at right now. And you're kind of tapering off, and you got the decline, right? So, you know, and given the, it's also organizational, you know, remember the US is much more complex compared to, say, a city-state like Singapore, which is only about 5+ million, right? We're 330 million, we're a 3-tier kind of government, not just 1 tier. And it's very, very complex. The individualism is getting sort of getting the kind of the worst of us in some ways, right? And then the cultural conflict, especially with Trump, the way, you know, I joke with people, that's how he talks from New York City, right? The guy's from Queens, New York. And, you know, the cultural conflicts between New Yorkers and the West Coast has been going on for decades. That's nothing new, except that when Trump comes in, he sort of put it on steroid, right? The way he talks. And then you got the highly intellectual people in the Bay Area, in Seattle, and they got the entertainment moguls and all that in Southern Cal. And that cross-cultural conflict has got a little bit worse, right? And, you know, one thing led to another, and it's very sad for me to say, which is sort of antithetical against what I do. Part of what I do as a chief mentor of next-gen leaders is to help people, whether you are Gen Z or Millennial or Gen X, right? To really build a positive, strong, scalable mindset and soft skills in addition to your hard skills, and move in a better direction, right? And that's part of the common theme that I like to bring people back to, given all the craziness that's going on right now, all the global turbulence. You know, it's ever changing. In fact, change is accelerating right now. There are many signs that America, it's a bit on a decline. And, you know, and unfortunately, you know, the way that a lot of the powerful Democrat leaders, you know, of course, there are different factions, different, you know, different agendas, and there's subsets even within a party, both parties. Some of them got really pissed off because they're kind of, they got character assassinated, right? But Trump is actually a very smart marketer, and the way he talks, the way he tweets and all that, he does it, you know, sort of strategically in some ways, but a little bit of some nuttiness to that as well. And, you know, I see quite a bit of, you know, in Silicon Valley, you got the very intellectual liberals, you got the entertainment liberals, the leaders, and some of them like to see return on investment on what they have invested in so far, whether it's money or capital or social capital. And some of them is really just kind of more ego-driven or a combination. It's just a very, very complex equation going on right now. And I'm sure that we're going to have quite a bit of more specific questions that I could address.
Yeah, we'll certainly dive into, I mean, there's so much to dive into. I almost don't know where to start. In commenting on your comment, and I'm willing to talk openly about it. And, you know, I get nasty text, emails, Twitter messages from both sides. I guess that means I'm probably doing something right. But, you know, kind of when you're talking, it popped in my head, going back to like President Obama. Looks like a wonderful husband and father, an eloquent statesman, great speaker, very regal, and kind of a good ambassador to the world. But when I look back at some of the policies, I found myself, probably disagreeing with like 70% of them. And I look at Trump, President Trump, pardon the disrespect, and he is not as much those things that President Obama was strong at. He's not specifically regal or eloquent or a great global ambassador. He arguably may not even have the morals of quote unquote or character of an Obama. But this is where I get conflicted. I find myself agreeing, at least on many of the less government and tax issues, with many of the policies that he's done. So again, I find good, some good, I guess you could say, in both parties. And I know that one was very eloquent and one is not, and maybe not a great global ambassador, but from a policy perspective, sometimes you have to ruffle feathers. You can't be everyone's friend, and you need to make tough decisions. And that contrast of the two is probably also what led to some of the bifurcation that we're going through now. Why don't I, sticking on a theme of kind of going over tough issues, why don't we talk a little bit about, I guess there's three global superpowers, the US, China, and Russia, but let's focus in a little bit on the challenges of the relationship that's been brewing since Trump took office and has been accelerated with COVID-19 relative to the US and China, and the state of our relations now. It feels an awful lot like a Cold War.
It is. You have to understand Trump's psychology, because I could identify with a lot of people doing what I do, right? Because I've been mentoring, coaching people for 20,000 hours, and kind of recognizing his psychology. He thought that by befriending, at least on a service, and sort of applying his negotiation power with the President Xi Jinping, actually Secretary General Xi Jinping or Chairman Xi Jinping, and and also with a Putin, would be a way to hopefully get closer and build a better relationship, not fight as much, etc., plus other agenda that he wants to achieve. But given after COVID and after, in fact, after years of President Xi being in power, I think it feels to me that the vast majority of Americans are feeling that the Chinese government has an agenda that was a little bit different than what Americans, or at least American leaders, government leaders, expected for a long, long time, right? So there's been a bit of a pivot, turning points over time, cost effect. I think it's come to the point where, we know that China's got a humongous market and they got a lot of power, is growing. And it's quite clear to almost every American that China did not do as good of a job as it should have done when it comes to COVID spreading. And I'm seeing lots of signs from a lot of Americans, majority of Americans, that they're not pleased about the behavior of the government in China. As for many of us, we've done a lot of business in China, right? Been doing business in China for decades. I sold a lot of stuff to them, different companies, right? Ran Asia Pacific and et cetera, technology. But at the same time, what Trump is trying to do is to not let China accelerate its growth as fast and try to kind of take out a knee or kind of remove the muscle, or try to, it's a little bit of a brute force in some ways. And like you said, Angelo, a lot of his strategies are great, President Trump. I love the, kind of a corporate tax reduction, the kind of reducing a lot of the stupid regulations that slow down entrepreneurs and companies, et cetera, that give us a lot of burdens. And kind of back closer to Reaganomics. That's a fantastic thing. Plus stronger safety, security, stronger defense. And under the Obama administration, I admire President Obama as well, because he came from a legal kind of a law background. So his oratory skills was very top notch to begin with, right? So he knows how to communicate and gel with people. That's where you get when you kind of have a bit of a litigation legal background from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, or whatever, right? And so he's a very good orator, and in a way, President Obama knew how to connect with a lot of the subsets of the countries where they felt they were left out, right? Now, when President Trump came in, one of the things that I admire about President Trump, whether you love him or hate him, is that he really gave up a lot, right? He lost, what, $1 billion so far? I forgot, right? Not even taking salary. He really has his heart to solve some big problems that we have. And I do see a lot of massive problems that most people don't see in America and around the world. And now, although some of the execution was a little bit sloppy, even Newt Gingrich said that, I fully agree. A lot of things he's done so far is actually very good. It's come to the point right now, especially given the exacerbation, I lost my voice a little bit because of my surgery, of COVID, COVID. Now, a lot of people, tables are turned right now, and I'm sure that the administration is thinking about how is China is going to pay for part of the suffering that America and the world has seen so far. Whatever trillions of dollars, I have no idea. I'm just guessing right now, right? Just an educated guess. So it's going to be ever turbulent. It's going to be ever changing. And I'm going to go back to the theme that the most important thing that we need to do as CEOs and executives and as principals and family office executives, as ultra high net worth or whatever, is really build yourself up and your organization up so that you could fend off, you could defend, and you could be in good offense as well, and be a lot more astute in navigating. But I'm sure we're going to cover more of that part.
Yes, a couple of the things that you brought up, I wanted to comment and lead into relative to U.S. and China relations. Last week, we had on a Silicon Valley thought leader that you are aware of, Vivek Wadhwa. That's actually up on my YouTube channel now. I highly recommend it. And he was very harsh relative to China and spoke about, the movie Wolf Warrior and that being kind of the nickname for China. And like you said, a little bit of that plus COVID has caused a little bit, arguably, of backlash around the world. You hear President Trump talking about that, these are the things that I've been talking about, that we need to bring manufacturing more back here. But that's going to cost more money than it would in China. And do we want to pay more money for goods? So that creates complexities as well. Now, India and Mexico may play into that as being an alternative, but a combination of some of the things that I noted, you could argue and and we'll talk a little bit later relative to, although we have grave challenges here, grave, trust me, I know it. We also have some tremendous people and opportunity here in America that still creates an opportunity that could last for decades and hopefully longer to come. But would that be damaging to China as the US and other countries now want to have more antibiotic production, more manufacturing, more supply chain, more regionally in the US or North America and Europe, the EU, et cetera? Or do you think that there'll be some concessions from China and some compromises along the way?
I think it's going to be all the above. In fact, I think the Trump administration is actually being very strategic for bringing a good part of the supply chain back to the U.S., maybe spread a little bit, kind of across North America to our neighbors, North and South. And one reason for that is really risk mitigation, right? And when you look longer term, as China is building its power economically, militarily, geopolitically, applying soft power and also applying wolf warrior power. And some of them is done with diplomacy, some of them is done with blunt, ways that kind of piss off a lot of people around the world. And I think it's being very strategic, especially for the medical supply chain, for things that we don't depend anymore. It's wonderful that we're energy independent. I know a lot of people want to have renewable energy, anti-oil and gas, but for now, we have to keep them. We cannot just kind of stop right away. Things don't work like that. And for massive change in legacy systems, it does take some time to change. And sometimes, as we all know, we all sophisticated in this audience, sometimes it's kind of like a shoulder surgery, right? You're gonna feel some pain first from my drugs, physical therapy before it gets better, right? So certainly the first steps to bring part of the supply chain back and also spread out through some of the other parts of the world out there. And but one thing about China is very smart, right? China, in fact, a friend of mine in San Francisco mentioned, oh, Chinese are very smart, right? Oh, this anti-VC, anti-thing, that the China is going to invest LP within LP within LP within LP before it get to the GP. You cannot track them, right? So Chinese government and also Chinese private sector, their leaders are very smart. A lot of them actually come from the top universities, engineers. They do things very methodically, right?
Yes.
And so they do things very methodically. And I'm Chinese by heritage. I've done business in China. I used to have, I've done a lot of things in China over the past couple of decades. I got a lot of friends in China all over the world, but I'm global American and I want the world to win, right? Patriotically American, absolutely. And I think over time, it's going to be, things are not that, things might seem to be tactical short-term for some people, but actually Trump is actually thinking long-term right now in many ways.
And of course, everyone, even those in their 80s, are familiar with the company maybe 2 months ago they were not familiar with, the fast rising social media platform TikTok, a Chinese company that has really taken off as much as another social media platform. I probably got to go back 5 or 6 years, probably around Instagram or maybe one of the others. So it's done great. It's a Chinese company. There have been concerns relative to cybersecurity and privacy. And we're all familiar that Trump came incredibly close, and who knows what might happen, to banning it from the US. Microsoft stepped in. I haven't heard as much or haven't followed it as much in the last week or two. I don't know if that is still on course. But what do you think of the dynamic of TikTok, of security and privacy issues, spying, for lack of a better word, and forcing the hand of, to some degree, a Microsoft or another strategic purchaser, who knows, maybe a shocker like Walmart, I have no idea, to potentially buy TikTok USA operations?
Sure. Let me sort of step back a little bit and give you a bigger picture about what's going on, right? When it comes to AI and machine learning, China actually has an advantage when it comes to big data, right? Because lots of data, they force upon you, right? There's hundreds of millions of cameras, as an example, capturing visual data on everyone, plus other very sophisticated digital tools and systems and platforms they put in place, right? Way ahead of America in some ways, right? And once the CCP dictates, you have to follow. It's not like Trump dictates, you have to go through Congress, you got to go through the House and then get approved by the Senate, and you got state, local, they fight all the time, blah, 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 right? Bipartisan. And, we in a way, we're disadvantaged, right? We also advantage and disadvantage at the same time. It's a very tricky equation here. So what President Trump, in my opinion, is what President Trump is trying to do is to slow down the way that certain communist regimes work out there is that if a government knocks on your door and say that I want to have that, you're not going to say no to them. Okay, if a government's knocking on the door on ByteDance, TikTok, right? Oh, I want to see all the data, including all the American kids, right? Boom, they got it, all the data. Right? Not just a profile, but the videos, the patterns of how we behave, cause effect, psychologies, boom, 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 right? Feed into the machines. And I'm sure that it's in the government's hands already. It's a no-brainer. Come on, we're not stupid, right? And so, but once what President Trump's trying to do is actually ingenious in some ways, right? Okay, all right, then I'm gonna force to sell the US side. So at least we're gonna slow down, stop the future data from flowing into the platforms and servers of different regimes and all that. and number one. Number two, an American company is going to acquire the IP, right? Including the platform, the AI, and the data, right? But boom, Chinese are smart, right? So you must have seen that out of the blue in the past week or so, the government came up with a new regulation. You know what? All right, it might I have a new regulation about export IP technology, right? That might stall the acquisition by Microsoft or Walmart or whomever, or Oracle, right? And I think if Microsoft or Oracle or Walmart would acquire TikTok, at least the US operations and part of the world operations, I think it's a very beautiful thing to do, right? From an American standpoint. But once again, tit for tat, right? Plus it's being very strategic right now. The way that Chinese works, the government works, right? And remember, China, it's a 4,500-year-old civilization, at least, right? I could even talk about a lot of biblical history. That's amazing if you want it separately. And, one of the things that hasn't changed is this thing of faith, right? If they feel so threatened that the massive faith is going to be lost, they're going to go to war with you, right? Like Taiwan, it's a trigger point right there. And despite many other things, is that they don't want to lose face in some way. We all have that, Americans around the world, correct? But for the Chinese, it's extra important. It's kind of like Guanxi, right? It's the relationships within trusted private networks. We all have that, right? Americans are lower in context, Chinese are higher in context, Japanese are even higher in context in that relationship in the ways that fit within a culture. Does it make sense? So I think when it comes to TikTok, it'll be interesting to see whether, I do know that there are some very powerful, VC firms in the US and in China involved as shareholders, massive shareholders in TikTok, ByteDance. In fact, I know one of the billionaires in one of the very top-notch VC firm. I think he has some influence with Washington, American. And from the VC major investor standpoint, it's a massive win to them. It's an exit, right? It's a good exit. And there's also political and social, economic and social geopolitical implications as well. So I'm sure everyone is trying to strike something where it is maximum to their benefit. That's how these business people think, right? And for the benevolent ones here, there's also a good-hearted social cause, but it depends on a person, depends on the organization that you talk to.
And what's China's relationship with effectively its Asian neighbors, Japan, South Korea, India, Singapore? China's going to be the dominant force. Is it all in line with quote unquote Chinese policy, or is there angst and frustration, and has it gotten worse during COVID-19 and the economic challenges the world is going through?
A spectrum, depends, okay? When you look at, let's analyze that, okay? So we got Japan, South Korea, North Korea, Greater China, outside mainland China, Southeast Asia, which includes Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, etc. South Asia, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Australasia, Australia, New Zealand, okay? So each, and I travel close to 3 million miles, right? A lot of it is really Asia Pacific. So I know the spectrum of different Asia Pacific cultures like you wouldn't believe, right? So the joke is that when you go to Australia, give them a business card, they throw it like Frisbee, right? But when you go to Japan, it's a ceremony. It's a different thing. Japan and China has always been in deep conflict for a long time, especially with Prime Minister Abe gone. It's a bit of a question mark right now, right? I think Abe did a great job. With Korea, if its GDP, at least about 10 years ago, if 0.5% of the GDP of China that connects with Korea is affected, it's going to affect 1% of the GDP of South Korea. That's how interdependent they are, right? But the South Koreans don't actually like as much about their being not controlled, but South Korea, it's a very different equation, right? Because it's got US heavily in it as well as an ally. And then North Korea, in a way, is a bit like a buffer and also a bit of a separate story, correct? When it comes to potential long-range missiles. When it comes to Greater China, you know the Hong Kong story. It's now accelerated in terms of ownership by China, not 2049, right? that has caused a lot of angst and anger around the world. But I'm from Hong Kong originally. I speak fluent Cantonese. I really feel for the Hong Kong people and part of the Hong Kong government from a human standpoint. And even some high-level officials in Hong Kong government, I know some of them, they're good people. They're in a rock between two hard places, right? They have to account to the bosses in Beijing. They're good people, they cannot say no, but at the same time, they're in a very difficult position right now, especially given all the unrest lately. Taiwan, with the current president regime, is gonna keep on being defiant a little bit against China. I know some of the previous heads are there. It's pretty, it's an ally of China. Don't be surprised that Trump is gonna remove some of the couple of decades old soft rules that's been laid out that China is not gonna be recognized by anyone else. Otherwise, China, we're gonna shoot you down, right? So I don't know, Trump might even go like that in the future. I have no idea, right? So I'm guessing what might happen in the future. And when it comes to Southeast Asia, it's a very interesting situation. Southeast Asia is very dependent on China. In fact, a lot of the countries got China as the bigger exporter, importer, and or importer than America right now. So in a way, economically, it's very interdependent, right? But some of them actually don't like what's going on in terms of the bullying that they've been experiencing from China. Look at the South China Sea. Malaysia is very close to China. I got a lot of good friends here, and I've been involved, Singapore, very close, but Singapore is very smart. They're very objective as well, very smart government. And you got Thailand, very close to China, also close to the US. You got other countries, Philippines, it's a different story. The story of Australia. I joke with a lot of Australian friends of mine and say, hey, would you guys mind being acquired by US? Actually, 3 out of 4 hands raise their hands, right? But you guys drive on the wrong side, right? So the culture, the relationship between the US and Australia has always been very tight.
Yes.
New Zealand, it's a bit of an enclave, it's a bit of a sanctuary for a lot of people, but it's, Peter Thiel's got a place there. A lot of people, Americans, Brits, Chinese got places in New Zealand. It's a farthest away from nuclear threats, at least, right? That's part of how people think. And then, the story between India and China, right? India and China, they are in conflict. And I think it's not going to get better any worse. India is going to move closer. They're close with the US already. And you already see alliance being formed right now, despite Trump's lack of apparent multilateral, but it's actually being very multilateral, but in a more strategic way with some sloppiness, I think, allying sort of India, the Australasia, Japan, India, or South Korea, excuse me. And so I think it's a Jekyll and Hyde situation, from the neighboring countries of China's standpoint. And it'll be a very, it's actually very, I think it's very, very interesting, So.
Yeah, well, that's a very good overview when you lead into my next question relative to India. So I put the US, China, and Russia as kind of the big three. If I had to put a fourth in, it probably would be India. Trump is likely making the correct move in taking already good relations and taking it a step further. So we have a stronghold in a powerful nuclear country, other than China, that being India. Also, the opportunity for aligned partnership for potentially manufacturing. It appears, even if it's to angst China, that strengthening their relationship with India, the world's largest democracy, that would be a very good thing for Trump to do, and he appears to be doing that.
Well, hey, listen, the CEOs of Alphabet and Microsoft, all right, 2 of the 5 largest companies are immigrant Indian Americans. And, and Indians, look at Silicon Valley. Listen, a good chunk of the technology executives and CEOs are actually Indian Americans. I got a lot of Indian American friends, right? You go to the city of Fremont, it's like the Indian headquarters in Silicon Valley in the South Bay, right? We joke in different ways, right? When I talk to different friends of mine that comes from different cultures, but we're all Americans, right? I kind of talk to people a little bit differently, but it's within my spectrum of personalities, being genuine and authentic all the time. Back to your question, U.S. India, I think it's a beautiful thing. That alliance, it's a beautiful thing. It's kind of like Australia and U.S. is a beautiful thing. I think Southeast Asia is very interesting. It's one of my favorite regions, by the way. I've been to Singapore 60 times, Thailand 50 times, Indonesia 50 times. I love the culture, I love the food, I love the people there. It's a bit more diverse. Finally, after decades, the VC scene, technology investor scene, is being taken off, right? Which is great. I know a friend of mine, he might just become the next president for a humongous country in Southeast Asia. I think those are, they're going to be, it depends on the country too. I think the magnitude and the degree of their relationship with China is actually, you have to chop it up into different contexts, right? Never generalize anything. Sometimes it's kind of like co-opetition in Silicon Valley, in New York City, right? It's kind of like, you have a wine together, you do business, you do a deal, you're my customer, I'm your partner, I'm your vendor, boom, on the other side, we're competitors, right? That's part of how the world works today. And I think in a way, hyper competition is actually normal right now. So part of what I do is to groom my students or clients to be very astute in being strategic and on the psychology and know how to execute it well. So.
Yeah, that's true. And we're not going to go into it as much because we did it with Jason for over an hour and a half about 2 months ago. And that's up on both my YouTube and my podcasting platform, the Angelo Robles podcast, but very deeply that Jason's a mentor to some of the rising generation of some of the most successful generational families, a mentor and advisor for a college, for a career, and really one of the world's most foremost authorities on the subject. So we do encourage you to go back and watch or listen to my prior from just about 2 or 2.5 months ago with Jason. It was great. Staying on the topic a little bit, because when you mentioned like 2 of the top 5 tech CEOs were born in India here in the US, yes, that's 100% true. So one thing, because it sounds like I probably have been in agreement too much with the president so far. One thing that I vehemently disagree with him on is the stance on immigration. We're a big country, land-wise, relative to our population compared to India, China, and other countries. People per square mile is actually excellent. Now, we're not also as old per the average age population of some of those countries, but we're starting to trend a little bit negatively in that direction. There's so much amazing global talent, and that really, and you can't always assume, well, they need to come here to a great university and prove that they're smart. There's nothing wrong with talented, hardworking, blue-collar people that come here that add to the fabric and culture of this country, and you do not know what they're going to produce as children that are going to go to even another level. That is one area where I think we're making a grave mistake. And I think, we had a guest on a month ago that said in 5 years, countries are going to be effectively giving tax benefits and paying for maybe select immigrants to come here as opposed to keeping them out.
Right. My guess is that, let's say that if President Trump and Pence are going to win again this November, let's make a hypothesis, right? Assumption that I believe that the immigration is going to get a bit more relaxed starting in 2021. And I think
so too.
I think he's going to more focus on the high-end immigrants, because once you get the high-end immigrants, it's going to be a bit more accretive to the GDP per capita, et cetera, right? And you bring in more Indians, and I think certainly he's being very wary about mainland Chinese. And one worry is really espionage, which is a fact, okay? And I'm sure that a lot of you guys we're not stupid, right? And when you look at a lot of the espionage that's been happening, that's why the Trump administration is being very aggressive, even in university, in different places, right? I see quite a bit of that, live of that in Silicon Valley as well. And it's part of him trying to speed up America, try to at least get parts of America back to nice and shiny armor, innovate again. For other parts, he would probably rescue. And right now it's election. He's trying to get votes, right? So he's stopping, immigration until the end of this year. I don't fully agree with that as well. I think it's a little bit too drastic, but I'm hopeful that it's going to be a much wiser implementation next year when it comes to immigration.
Now, the other country, a neighbor of ours, is potentially, it's a country that we have a good relationship with, although they effectively have a socialistic government now, and that's Mexico. But that is a country that I think we should strengthen our relationship with. And if we're looking for manufacturing to even be, I think, a little more cost effective than China, or bringing it back here to the United States, we for sure should amp up the relationship with Mexico. I have other reasons as well, from the country being beautiful to lots of people to great natural resources to its industrialness. There's other benefits. I look at Mexico as potentially, I know it's in a socialistic government now, but potentially trying to be optimistic. And I know they got the issue with drugs and all that. But a country that could, if certain things go its way and it makes the right decisions, be on the rise in the coming decade or two. Now, I know we've said that about Brazil and other countries before, and it had stop and go, stop and go. But do you think that from the United States perspective, we should even strengthen and further our relationship with Mexico?
I think so. But I think Trump's got bigger problems to worry about right now, at least on his more immediate agenda, in his America First agenda, is get more jobs back, more manufacturing back. And that's going to go on for quite a while. But I think after a while, Mexico, assuming that the governments do a better job, both sides, on kind of sort of, it's a very sensitive thing to say, but the cartels are very powerful in Mexico, okay? It's also risk mitigation too. And if that is not in control, then it's, there's a bit, it's a bit more reserved if I were a US president, you see? And so there are some risk mitigation factors you have to keep in mind. I think it's a natural ally, absolutely. But I think Trump is going to keep on implementing. I cannot wait until I see the Tesla and Apple new factories, et cetera, a lot of factories being set up. And even though the costs in part of the South and Midwest are not going to be as low as, say, Vietnam or China is a bit higher right now, or India.
Yes.
But it'll be lower than, absolutely, than, say, in Fremont, Silicon Valley, right? And number one. And number two, then you are much more in control and you have less to worry about when it comes to supply chain, or when it comes to part of the supply chain process, if you will. Then some risks are mitigated, even though the direct costs are higher, but it balances out, right? So I think that's going to keep on going for quite a while. And I think it's a very smart idea to keep bringing some, of course, very AI-augmented, AI-assisted manufacturing. I think the jobs are not going to be a traditional building without AI, right? So it's going to be a lot of new jobs being formed that are around and different than the traditional jobs. While some of the people in the Rust Belt especially, and that's all they can do, and I think Trump is all trying to help them a little bit, at least for now. At least at the B20, G20, we're very big on promoting, encouraging the governments, and now it's become sort of regular vocabulary about upskilling and reskilling around the world, right? Yes, including America.
And I promise everyone we're going to get to some things on global investing in Asia. That'll be a little bit later, but I still want to stay on some of these themes a little bit. We had a great guest on who refused to be videotaped or audio taped, so you had to be a live listener. His name was John Ferrezzi. He's not even an American, he's a Canadian, but he spoke glowingly about how America could still own, quote unquote, the next 100 years. We're going to get to some negative stuff shortly, trust me, but I'm going to mention some of the positives. We're still at 25% the world's largest GDP. We have a sizable country, oceans on both sides, haven't been invaded in hundreds of years since the War of 1812. Have I believe, the world's most powerful military. Our age per population, like I mentioned earlier, is not as horrific as Italy, Spain, Japan, even China, which is important. You want to have youth, and that adds to the work base, et cetera. You could also argue, and that group is not employed, that's one of the things that leads to civil unrest and strife. But we'll save that one coming a little longer. We have great contract law. We are dominant in entrepreneurship in VC. We're relatively energy independent. I mean, there are, admittingly, a lot of positives to the United States. We have great partners and friends like Australia, Great Britain, much of the EU, India. And again, we're going to get to the challenging points very, very shortly, and they're a little scary. But in terms of putting the positives on one side, the Ben Franklin techniques, and the negatives on another, there for sure are many positives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's the question again, Angelo?
The question's going to be more on the negative side. So why don't we jump a little bit into that? We obviously, the COVID-19 has caused a grave challenges and has been historic with its impact to the economy. And likely until there's a vaccine and whatever, 70% of the population has it, and none of that is going to happen quickly in the next 30, 90 days. By the time it's all done and rolled out and we're hopeful and whatever, months and months and months out. So we're still going to have high unemployment. Lots of small business owners, restaurants, et cetera, are going out and down. Big cities are in trouble. We have civil unrest. We had uprisings in Seattle and Portland. And arguably, some will say if Trump's elected, that could even start to increase. We have challenges in society that I don't think, and maybe I'm being a little dramatic, that we've seen, at least in my lifetime. Wasn't quite around during Watts and some of that, but it's in a different era now. It's very, very different. I'll put it this way, Jason. One of my multi-billion-dollar families, who's very diverse in their global holdings because they're always afraid something could go wrong, said the odds of chaos in the US pre-COVID and civil unrest, they put it like 0.001, almost impossible. They now put it at 3 to 5%. And again, that may be a little extreme, but do we have occurrences that are happening that could change the fabric of this country as we know it?
Well, it makes me sad, certainly, but in a way, it's not surprising. The degree to which it's been a set of crazy times this past half a year, it's pretty amazing. It's certainly, I never seen anything like that in my lifetime as a tail end boomer, right? I think when it comes to COVID, I'm hopeful that it's going to accelerate getting better. I think the massive testing is getting a lot more efficient right now. The mortality rate, it's actually manageable. It's not bad. When you look at the numbers, when you look at the real numbers and kind of chop it up, right, is that, I hate to say it, I got parents that are 89, 88 years old and 95 years old, but they're healthy, fortunately. But the vast majority are senior folks with preconditions, right? Flu, pneumonia, or a weak immune system. And then there's a curve, right? When it comes to teenagers, early 20s, the mortality rate is very, very low, right? They're much more resilient. I got a friend of mine who's actually in his 50s, caught COVID, MIT alum, took drugs, and boom, he's back in shape right now, right? So it's all manageable. I'm hopeful. I'm very saddened by the bad organized crime, the organized criminal, the organized crime, criminal organizations, right? As well as the rogue protesters and the kids that are out for a party that took advantage of, say, George Floyd as a political football and kind of took advantage of the situations. A lot of protests, peaceful protests are fine, right? I mean, it's America, we're a free society, but it's not peaceful at all, right? So a lot of things happened in ways there where it ended up in lots of violence, lots of killings. The murder rates have never been higher in recent times in many, many cities. It's all, unfortunately, Democrat run. And looting, etc. That's unacceptable, right? I'm like you. I grew up in San Francisco. I went to Berkeley. I grew up as a very liberal guy, right? I party. I got a fake ID, went to SF party when I was still under age 20, right? You know, I did all sorts of crazy stuff when I was a young man. But today, with age, I got a bit more centered, right? Got a lot wiser. and I coach and mentor a lot of kids right now that are very bright, right? So I think, one has to be very careful about, some of the idols or symbols you see out there, like BLM, right? Black lives absolutely matter. Black lives matter. All lives matter. But you got to be very careful about the actual organization, about the Marxist intent and all that, right? And don't get sucked in by a lot of the influences by, in fact, there's a lot of educational, K to 12 imperfections that I see out there, especially with public school systems, right? And I know that inside out doing what I do. And also, the media, the bias, right? The deceptions all the time. Plus other influencers, like the politicians and people don't have the sharp, discerning mindset and skill set to be able to recognize their own their own self-awareness. And then in a way, let the ego take over a little bit more than it should, you see. But I think it's all manageable in a way. At the same time, there are a lot of symptoms about America that we're really getting to be a pretty mature country right now. It's just like when you guys, I encourage you to maybe spend an hour or so studying ancient Rome, right? How it works. There's lots of similarities right now. Lots of power in Washington, the senators, the Congress, lots of power with the leaders. And some of the leaders are actually pretty selfish in terms of what they want, right? They're not really there for the people per se. Partially they are, because they hire a lot of people. And, at least for me, I try to do what I can in my small ways to help make it better for society, for the people and markets that I serve.
Yeah, I mean, following the trajectory of Rome would not necessarily be a good thing. Hopefully, we shall learn. I have a reason for asking my next question. It may make you a little uncomfortable. Trump or Biden? Who do you think? I didn't say who you want. Who do you think will win in November?
I would say now, once again, I got friends on both sides, right? And they know me. I'm a very objective guy. I say what I am. I prefer transparency, which is not like Chinese. Okay, Chinese are more translucent, sometimes opaque, right? Many parts of the world are like that. But I'm American, so I'm very objective with you, and I'm giving you my fair, best guess answer. I think Trump's going to win, assuming that the mail fraud is not going to be happening in a way that is unmanageable. Got it? Now, some mail fraud is going to happen, guaranteed, right? And I have no idea. I think Trump, if the mail fraud is not going to happen to a degree where it is, let's say it's controllable, manageable, I think Trump's going to win by a pretty sizable margin from the electoral college standpoint, not by popular votes, right? So I'm a Californian, right? Obviously, California is going to be a couple million votes above, when it comes to popular votes, right? But I think it's going to, all the loyal blue states is going to stay blue. All the loyal red states are going to stay red. The swing states, I think the vast majority is going to go for Trump. And at the end of the day, you have to look at the basic needs and wants of people. On average, people are not stupid, even though there are a lot of stupidities for a lot of people. They really want to have, even a lot of Democrat moms that I see, right? I'm surrounded by my Democratic friends in Silicon Valley. We want safety, security. Would we like to invite the radical left gaining power, and all of a sudden crime is going to rise? Safety and security is going to decrease in my beautiful suburb in Silicon Valley. I don't want that, right? My beautiful neighborhood I have not, no crime in the past decades. How blessed is that? I don't want that to change, right? And number one. Number two is that, before COVID, come on, COVID is such a force majeure, massive force majeure situation. And, it's a very complex situation. We were lowest in unemployment, Black, Latino, Asian American, etc. Okay, and people, economics are very important to people. Okay, and number three, I believe that there's a significant conversion of lots of Black Americans, believe it or not, okay, for a variety of reasons. And, you know, the convention's one thing, but one secret weapon that Trump has, believe it or not, some of you might be shocked to hear it, is actually Kanye West, okay, especially with the Christians, okay? And number one. Number two, and a lot of the Latino Americans that I know, they're actually happy with the economics they're getting here. I remember a connection of mine, very powerful guy, he runs a national Hispanic organization, right? He said that, hey, dude, you know, I joke with people, even though he's 6 years, I call him dude, try to do that. You know, why do you do what you do, right? Besides your for-profit, why are you running this? He said, you know what, I actually don't need to run this nonprofit, but it gives me business advantage, right? And I got a bunch of Democrat, high-powered Democrat, Asian American friends of mine in Silicon Valley. Why don't we do the same? Why don't we form the thing to catch up with the Black Americans and Latino Americans, right? Because they're way ahead of us when it comes to political power, right? It's done for economic reasons and for political reasons, right? And so for a variety of reasons here, I believe Trump's going to win big. Assuming
Yeah, I'm sure everyone's waiting on bated breath for Angelos' opinion, which I'll give in a second. I basically echo so much of what you just said. And listen, in this country, you're a minority. I'm half Latino, so I'm half minority. Is there systemic racism? Yes. Do things need to get better and be more than talk? Absolutely. And there's many good points that maybe many of us have learned that we were closed-minded to in the last couple of months. I get it. But like you said, for the reasons of the far left and the Marxist element, it's getting very, very dangerous, I guess you could argue, from that perspective. I agree with you about Kanye. I don't think he's serious about running, but I'll put it this way. When Ross Perot got in the market as an independent with Bush versus Clinton, he took votes away from George Bush, and that helped Bill Clinton win. Kanye, although he has said some things that you would think, is he actually a little on the Republican and conservative side, but likely he would pull votes away from the Democrats. So they're going to really probably force him not to run, but that's an interesting angst that's occurring there.
Well, Angelo, let me jump into that, okay? I don't mean his jumping into being a presidential candidate, even before that, because the way he does things, you know, he's very, you know, arrogant in a very lovable way, right? He's got
very well said.
A lot of fans, Democrats, Republicans here, and he applies his power. Maybe the Holy Spirit is really working through him, right? Unless you are faithful Christian or Jew, you probably do. I got Muslim friends, I got secular friends, I got atheist friends, and all that. Once again, I'm being very objective and direct with you, right? No filter in between. I think that's an influence, number one. Number two is that I believe that more and more, of course, there's different subsets as well, right? You got the ones that are forever mentally changed, I hate to say it, but you got the ones that are like Ben Carson. In fact, one of my favorite interviews that I saw is one of my favorite actors, right? Morgan Freeman, Black, right? He's super successful, still talks with a soul accent, right? I got one of my best friends. He's a flaming liberal guy. We went to high school and college together, and I got best friends on the right side as well. You know, African American, right? But they believe that it's your mindset. I mean, not they, but depends on the person. Like Morgan Freeman got interviewed by Don Lemon, right? Flaming liberal, CNN. He said, "Hey, listen, Don, that's an excuse, right? Oh, hey, racist. Oh, the America is racist, blah, blah, blah." Morgan said, "That's an excuse, okay? Don't buy that. Look at you and I. You were examples right here, number one. Number two, work on your mind, work in your mindset. Make a decision to strive and thrive, and you'll get there. You're gonna have some bumps along the way. That's how the world works. Don't worry about it, right? Work on yourself, and not to hang on to these limiting beliefs that actually chain you, that slow you down, right? And that's what I've been seeing that certain party does all the time. Is you're gonna feed you enough here being semi-government dependent, and you're gonna get enough loyalty for you to get your vote, right? They want power, money, and votes. That's it, right? But one of the things that I admire about Trump, even though there's certain things that I don't agree with him on, there's certain things I wish he did not do, is that he's really here to solve some massive issues. We got some major massive issues. We have not even talked that much about foreign yet, right? It's still domestic right now. So
Yeah, no,
a lot of things are going on.
those are certainly, and again, we're not going to be able to get to everything. I want to have Jason on again, probably right after the election, and many things to talk about. We still have a couple of minutes left. Oh, and by the way, my prediction is I do believe Trump will win, but I do think the electoral vote will be closer than you do. But that does kind of bring up my next question related to all of this. And it's meant to be only a little tongue in cheek, but after this election, is the Republican Party dormant, may I say dead? What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the largest populations, along with baby boomers, are millennials and Generation Z. Generation Z is coming into the age of registering, of voting, of coming of age, of becoming political leaders, business leaders in time, etc. A lot of them are far left, I would say. Now, as they get a little older, are they likely to come a little bit more center? Yeah, but I don't think they're going to change 100%. I look at the young leaders in the Democratic Party, and I may disagree with a lot of them, but they have some interesting speakers and dynamic leaders. Where I look at the Republican Party, and I'm a little concerned it doesn't have enough youth and diversity from a variety of different perspectives. I'm also concerned, or would be if I was on the Republican side 100%, to Florida and Texas. In 4 years, probably not, but the trends are for Texas, perhaps in 8 or 12 years. And then that brings up for many of the family office association type families that their money, their resources, their capital. And one of my families feels this way, I know because they told me so. Is it possible, if not in 4 years, but perhaps in 8 years, that an AOC or someone, Elizabeth Warren, who's very intelligent and a great debater, I disagree with her with pretty much everything, but she would want to tax people that, God forbid, they're successful entrepreneurs, make money and support people in communities like 80, 90%. It's you're not motivated to want to build a company, to hire people, to build wealth and success. That's just not the American way. But I admit, I do see the trends leaning in that direction. Am I going a little overboard on this, or am I likely correct? Say I'm not.
I think no one can tell, Angelo. I got faith, lots of love for family, friends, and people around the world, my neighbors. But I'm hopeful. I do see interesting pipeline on both sides. And these are dynamic young people on both sides, right? And you're right, a lot of the Gen Z, especially not the ones that are super high achieving. At least I've mentored one-on-one, hundreds of Gen Z, right? And you may be surprised that they're not all that far left, a lot of them. And they're sensible, they're coachable, they're malleable, they could change your mind. Maybe because without strong mentorship or guidance, they've been sort of, the minds have been kind of affected or sometimes infested by these dark forces, right? That feeds into them. But until you help them to replace them with something a bit more empowering, then they come to the sensitive a bit more. One thing about Gen Z is that think about them as being sort of millennials, but totally on steroids, right? Very digital, but they're a lot more pragmatic compared to some of the millennials. And not all Gen Zs are, Bernie voters. Not at all. Not at all. A lot of them are actually, believe it or not, Republicans and Democrats that are more centered, right? And even in Silicon Valley. And sometimes it's really, especially at public school, the teachers, the books you read, the theologies, the anti-God, blah, 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 blah. They just been sort of influenced by ways that they were not aware they're influenced like that. But it's all transformational. It's all changeable, okay? So in a way, I am optimistic about America, medium, long term. I think our product life cycle, slow growth phase is gonna get extended because of the Trump administration. I think eventually China might exceed America in global GDP. Of course, when it comes to GDP by PPP, purchasing power parity, China exceeded America already. And clearly the government does not want to see the global GDP nominal is going to exceed America's anytime soon, right? So I think overall there are industries and functions in America around the world where we could actually regain or gain a #1 leadership and sustain that if we execute. And I'm hoping that Silicon Valley and Washington are going to work more closely together. My daughter, it's a software engineer at Google, and I see a lot of, kids that are a little bit very intelligent, but a little bit naive in some ways. And, but I'm hoping that the relationship is going to actually stabilize a little more starting 2021.
Those are very good points. I probably only have about 3 or 4 minutes left. And I always get one question, usually via text, but I hinted at it a couple of minutes ago. We have so little time to cover it on more deeper foreign affairs issues. And this one, we should have you back, but I'll ask it to get your quick overview. For American families of wealth and success that are active global investors, but not as active in Asia, whether it be in public companies, whether it be in real estate, or perhaps in VC, and the rise of VC in certain communities in Asia, how do you think they could become more active global investors, specifically Asia-based?
Okay, first of all, Asia is huge. It's very diverse, okay? Never talk about Asia as if it's a market. It's a spectrum, diversity of markets, China being the biggest, okay? Japan is a region by itself. China is a region by itself. Southeast Asia is a region by itself. Australasia is a region by itself. Indian subcontinent is a region by itself, okay? So they're very different from each other. Of course, with China, you have to be astute, keep selling to China, right? Form JVs if you have to, but these days it's less risky compared to the old days where you must transfer the American technology to China. So that's one of the things that Trump did quite well, right? Mm-hmm. And number one. Number two is that a lot of the East Asian, South Asian, the East Asian cultures in the past where, when you sign a contract, okay, it doesn't mean crap to them. It's just a piece of paper. But today, they're getting a little bit better. They have to kind of stick, especially for public companies listed in NYSE, NASDAQ, in Western stock markets, they have to be a bit more accountable, right? But in the old days, it's kind of like the nuclear deal in Iran, okay? You sign a deal with Iran, that's not how they think. You see, it's a piece of paper, I don't care. You see how much they violated the deal already here. I knew that's coming a couple of years ago, right? So I think when it comes to Asia, it's a fast growing, large, humongous sector of markets out there. You absolutely want to do business in Asia, right? And I've been doing business in Asia for 3-4 decades, right? And there's lots of growth there, but you have to get help in ways where you know what the hell you're doing. I see a lot of American executives that are, very naive. They go in there and they get perceived by customers and partners as being American, loudmouth Americans who don't know how to business, but America's got a lot of power, right? But you want to go there where you know how to manage your relationships. A lot of it's really relationship. Of course, your product or service, what you offer has to be great. It doesn't have to be super best above number two, but you have to do things in a way where the cross-cultural, the relationship management has to be very astute, right? So I encourage, it's a big question. Depends on whether you want to sell, you want to invest, you want to acquire, depends on the industry and the sectors and the horizontals. So it all depends, right? And the geographical as well. So you got a 3-dimensional matrix here to look at. So it depends. China, be cautious, be friendly, okay? Because one thing about Chinese, whether it's public sector, private sector, one thing about mainland Chinese, everywhere, Chinese in general, is they all like to learn. One thing you notice is that it's a tip for some of you, if you're not that cognizant, is that when you talk to a national government official or regional or provincial or local government official, you talk to the mayor, vice mayor, or talk to some high-level people in China that's in the government. One thing you notice is that they're always very curious. They love to learn. They really want to learn. When you go to Washington And you see some arrogance, some things that they don't want to learn, blah, 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 right? Politics take over. So that's a strength that I hope maybe I could help encourage Washington, wake them up a little bit here. You have to really uplift your own mindsets and become more of a learning machine, right? Not get all stupidly fighting each other, waste a lot of time, waste a lot of energy, and incur a lot of opportunity cost, right? So in general, yeah, absolutely do business in Asia.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back and do a much deeper dive into that. Unfortunately, time won't allow now. And amazingly, well over an hour has went by. It goes by quick. Jason, for those that would like to understand more of what you do on mentoring, from next generation leaders to family businesses in general, to understanding and perhaps being more active in business and investing in Asia, how could they learn more about you?
Well, I'm being known, as you know, as being a kind of a chief mentor, preeminent mentor, rainmaker, right? CEO advisor, technology advisor, board advisor, also acting C-suite or senior executive at some very select companies, as well as being a sought after speaker. So go to my website, is the easiest way, 3EQ.com, ThreeEQ.com. And you can always feel free to email me if you'd like to, jma, J-M-A, at 3EQ.com. Spell it out, ThreeEQ.com.
That's fantastic. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles, the host of the Angelo Robles podcast and founder and CEO at Family Office Association, a global membership organization dedicated to families globally of great success and their family offices, providing significant proprietary content, global programming, and now digitally more active and global than ever before, doing hundreds of different programs. It's been exciting a year. Check out our new website that went live about a week ago. It has a tremendous amount of resources. It's much more interactive. Same URL, FamilyOfficeAssociation.com. And you'll notice that we have a series of masterclasses and other deeper dives into very specific topics within the family office community, and more practically every month, if not even more frequently, to follow between now, the end of the year, and beyond. I'm very active on social media. YouTube is Family Office. FamilyOfficeAssociation.com is noted, and my email is angelo@FamilyOfficeAssociation.com. Jason Ma, thank you so much. I look forward to the next time, my friend. Thank you to our live audience and those that view or listen in at a point in the future. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much again, Angelo. It's been an honor and pleasure.
You're very kind. Thank you, Jason.